Episode 659 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Dr. Stewart Lonky and discuss his book, Outsmarting Obesity. A doctor reveals why we gain weight, why it matters, and what we can do about it. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/659. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness, the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. Each week, we dive deep into health and fitness topics that affect those of us over 40. I'm Coach Allen. I'm an NASM certified personal trainer with specializations in corrective exercise, behavior change, performance enhancement, and fitness nutrition. A Precision Nutrition Level 1 coach, a FAI certified functional age-link specialist, and an OTA Level 2 online trainer. Each week, I'm joined by our co-host, Coach Rachel. She is an NASM certified personal trainer and a RRCA Level 1 run coach. Let us be your coaches as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. One of the key things I've done as a coach is to always be learning and doing better. I surround myself with other top coaches and mentors, and each year I refine the way I coach to make 40 Plus Fitness better and better. Each year I grapple with renaming the program. I've used names like 8 Weeks to Wow, the GAS program, Be Fit for Task, and most recently, the Shed the Weight program. They all started as an idea, an approach to coaching. Each had an element of customization for the client, and as the amount of customization has increased. My newest one is practically all customized to the client. As I was bouncing around names, I was stuck. Christina's program is Christina's program, and Kyle's program is Kyle's program. So I'm relaunching my coaching program as the Your Name Here program. It works like this. We'll get on a discovery and planning call and design a program on the spot. Your goals equals your program. As you might imagine, there are only so many planning calls I can take, so I'm setting up an application process. This will let you know if the Your Name Here program is right for you. Go to 40plusfitness.com/apply. For this launch, I'm offering some incredible bonuses if you get your application done and in by September 15th. If you're ready to start winning this battle that so many of us are losing, go to 40plusfitness.com/apply and get started today. Hey, Raz, how are you?
Good, Alan. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. It's been busy weeks. Because I've done a few things. We did the workshop last week. And so that was really, really good. I enjoyed doing that. And, of course, did a ton of promotion for it to get out there that I was doing this. Right now looks, we got great turnout for it. So it was, really good event. I'm glad I was able to do that. And that's probably, I don't know if I'll do it live again like that, but I'll definitely save those recordings and I may make a product or something out of that to go forward.
That would be cool.
Definitely share it with all of my clients because it's one of the best things I've done to date. And then, I've launched and I'm in the process of a launch for my new program. And it's kind of interesting because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I've got these ideas for the new program and what I want to incorporate. And I'm like, but I've always come up with these names, like 8 Weeks to Wow and the Shed the Fat and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, but here's the problem. The way I'm coaching now is so different than the way I was coaching for those, especially for the 8 Weeks to Wow. It's a totally different way of coaching. And it's now almost all custom. So when I'm coaching someone, like if I were coaching, your program would be Rachel's program. It wouldn't be some wonky name that I decided I wanted to call it. It's your program. I'm writing it for you almost on the spot. And so I said, well, what do I name something that is unnameable until I know the name of the client that I'm coaching? And that's it. It's the Your Name Here moniker thing that when you're going to get a form and this says this is where you're going to insert your name, is your name here, program. And I'm like, so that's what I'm going to do is when I'm talking to people about it, their program, it's their program. And that's what it's going to be named. And that's what it's going to be is their program. And generally I'm still targeting 12 weeks. That's I think a solid way to look at it to start.
Mm-hmm.
But, we'll just look at it and say, what do you need? What do you want? What are your goals? And then from there, build out their program right there on the discovery and planning call. That's what I'm launching right now. And I'm taking applications for it because I can't obviously get on the call with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an application. It's 40plusfitness.com/apply. That'll take you to the application to let you know if that my approach is appropriate for you. But that's generally what I'm doing this week is basically that launch. So I've been really, really busy with that. And it cuts off on the 15th. So anyone that hasn't applied by the 15th, you'll miss this round. And there's some pretty significant bonuses in this round that include some bonus weeks, some freezes, which I've never done before. So this will be interesting. But if they sign up, obviously we're going through the holidays, and some people do want to take a week off.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm like, well, if you want to use a freeze week, you use a freeze week, and we add that week to the end.
Neat.
I've never done that before, but I know people want to need to take detours from time to time. So they can take a detour and I'll pay for it.
That sounds neat.
Yeah. And there's some other things that I'll throw in there as bonuses for folks that come in for this particular launch, because it's like I say, it's a new way that I'm going to put it all together. So while I'm doing this launch, which will go into the 15th, this is your time to apply. So you can apply for it. So how are things up there?
Good, warm and toasty, even through the end of this summer, getting into fall. But I'm just going to say I'm glad my camper has air conditioning.
Well, again, you only have a couple weeks, a few weeks, I guess, until we get to the actual fall. So it'll cool down.
I can't wait because fall makes for the best running season ever. So I can't wait.
Especially you get a lot of color change up there with yours.
We do. Yeah, that'll be coming. I don't know when our peak is this year in my area, but I think it's mid to late October is what they're predicting. So
I always thought it had something to do with the temperature and the rain.
Mm-hmm. Yep. TBD. Yes. See what happens.
All right. So are you ready to have a conversation with Dr. Lonky?
Sure.
Our guest today is a double board certified physician and expert in medical toxicology. In his new book, Outsmarting Obesity, he challenges the status quo about weight gain and obesity. With no further ado, here's Dr. Stewart Lonky. Dr. Lonky, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
So, as I go through and I read books to prepare for these conversations, typically I'll sit down with a piece of paper and I'll start writing down a note, like, oh, this is an interesting thing. And so it's one thing. And then it ends up being like a list. And I might end up with 4, 5, 6, 7 things. And then when I see a study, I'll follow that study and I'll go read the study because that was interesting. And I end up over there. And so I'm going to show this to you. And there's very few people are going to see this, but this is more.
looks like my desktop.
Yeah, but it's a word cloud. Is like I sat down, I started writing all these stuff down, like, okay, this and this. And then I'm trying to tie them all together. And so, I'm like, okay, this goes to this and that's over here. And it's like I was trying to solve a big puzzle. And then you put it together and literally solve the puzzle for me in literally one sentence. So all those words I wrote down, they came down to one sentence, which I thought was just brilliant. Obesity promotes systemic inflammation, and inflammation promotes obesity.
That's an excellent conclusion to come to, because that is kind of the secret of obesity and why it is medically a challenging situation for physicians. Particularly, we learned that lesson with the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. People wondered why obese individuals didn't do as well. And for me, it was pretty straightforward. They were already in an inflammatory state. So their immune system was being overtaxed on a daily basis. Their ability to cope with a virus that was novel, that was unlike anything they'd seen before, they were not going to do well when the cytokine storm happened.
Yeah. And there were other things too. Like I said, it was fascinating, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed going through that and really diving into the science of it. One of the things, obviously, of course, we all hear this. It's kind of a common thing. Okay, you're overweight, you're obese. Just stop eating crap, eat less. The whole individual agency. You're a grown man. Just stop.
I gave some examples with a patient of mine that's a real patient. It is very commonplace for people to look at morbidly obese individuals and state that, boy, that person should stop eating so much. And that individual agency being responsible for the obesity epidemic doesn't make any sense, first of all. And number two, it's erroneous. What we've learned and what I've learned in 10 years of doing this work and talking to people, reviewing articles, going through the literature, is that unfortunately the die is cast fairly early. And if we want to be smart about this, and that's why I named the book Outsmarting Obesity. I named it that because if you're not smart and you don't know what the root cause is, you'll never understand why when we diet, we can lose weight. I mean, you can restrict your calories and lose weight, but the minute you stop that crazy restriction or whatever it is that you're doing, you're going to gain it right back because you haven't addressed the real issue, which isn't individual agency. It is, unfortunately, I like to say it's a chemistry set within the body. It's chemical things that are happening and that have been happening now for generations.
A lot of times we'll talk about fat, and there's a kind of a thing in my industry that they love to talk about. They're like, well, add muscle because that's more bioactive than fat. And from a calorie expenditure perspective, that's a true statement. But fat's pretty busy.
Yeah, fat, it's interesting. I started medical school, and to me, fat was just, it was there. It was insulation in a sense. Got into dissections and realized very early in my first year of medical school, there was a lot of omental fat. There was fat throughout the body. And I happened to be in a medical school where one of the leading researchers, a fellow named Dr. Scott Grundy, was a professor. And Scott really taught us how fat was really an active endocrine organ. And it was just becoming understood how fat really is very important in communicating with the brain, secreting a number of different hormones that tell your hypothalamus, stop eating, you're full, or eat something, and communicating with other organs like the pancreas and dealing with glucose metabolism, insulin secretion. All of these things are the general in charge, sort of the catcher on the baseball team, who's really the captain of the team on the field, is fat. So fat's a very active biological tissue. Don't want to eliminate all fat. It serves a real purpose, but too much of it is obviously what we're talking about.
Yes. And so, it'll tell you when it's functioning the way it's supposed to, which is a very important part of this whole conversation. When it's doing what it's supposed to, it's telling you that you're full. You can go ahead and stop eating. We've got plenty of fat. We're good. It's kind of running a lot of other endocrine functions, communicating throughout the body and kind of helping, like you said, it's a perfect analogy, the catcher on a baseball field, making sure everybody's where they're supposed to be and doing the things they're supposed to do. But every once in a while, and the way I've heard it before, it was really in the context of insulin resistance and dealing with diabetes, prediabetes is okay. So we're eating and the body has more blood sugar, more than it needs, and it's got to store this somewhere. Can't store it in the liver, can't store it in the muscles. So it's going to try to store it in fat. And then at some level, it begins to try to it has to almost force the fat to take this energy. And so it keeps forcing it. And then what happens then is the fat cells, because we really aren't making a whole lot of these things that we have what we have, they get bigger and bigger. And even though they're fighting back to say, no more, they get overstuffed. And the way you said in here was it was sick fat.
Yes, and I think that fat cells becoming larger is a real problem. And I go into it discussing something that, I've never seen anyone discuss before. And you understand my subspecialty in internal medicine is pulmonary and critical care medicine. So I think in terms of oxygenation always. And oxygen has to diffuse into a fat cell, and it can't diffuse. There are elaborate studies showing how far oxygen can diffuse into the fat cell to nourish it. Because the fat cell needs oxygen just like your brain needs oxygen and your heart muscle needs oxygen. And as the fat cell gets bigger and bigger, that diffusion of oxygen can't happen. And so the fat cell's endocrine function becomes disturbed. Add to that something I think we're going to talk a little bit more about, and that is the fact that many chemicals that are in our bodies are not water soluble. So if we talk about heavy metals like lead and mercury and cadmium and so on, they're water soluble. So we get lead in our body, we try to excrete most of it. Some of it we'll store because we can't get it all out, and tomorrow we get exposed to some more. And that's how lead toxicity or mercury toxicity happens in industry, in people that are exposed to high levels, et cetera. But most of the organotins, all of the organic molecules that we're exposed to, and I need to tell you, Alan, there are 85,000 chemicals that are currently used in the United States. 85,000 different chemicals approved for use by the Federal Trade Commission, not by FDA. And that's what most people don't understand. Those chemicals have never gone through any testing at FDA. And if they do, it's maybe a handful of them, but they are not water soluble. So they require the liver to break them down into water soluble pieces. There's only, once you're in the body, once a chemical is in the body, the only way out is through the urine or sweat. So that's it. There's no other way out. You're either going to urinate it out or you're going to sweat it out. And sweating is very inefficient, but it can help. The fact is that the liver is sometimes, quote, otherwise occupied, close quote. You're taking a pill, it's going to break that down. You're drinking some alcohol, the liver says, hey, you know what? Come back later. Go someplace and hide. Well, it's not water soluble, but it's fat soluble. So the fat cell becomes occupied, not only is it getting bigger, not only is it not getting enough oxygen, but now it's got bisphenol A sitting in there. It's got fluorochemicals sitting in there. It's got a whole lot of other organic molecules that don't belong there. And that screws up the fat cell communicating with the hypothalamus, getting signals. That is the definition of a sick fat cell. And obese individuals have sick fat cells. That's the problem. Too much time with the accumulation of these different chemicals, too little oxygen. And that's one of the many reasons. If there's something that you learned, if you've gone through the book, Alan, and your readers and your listeners too, as they go through it, they realize what I said at the very beginning. It's a highly complex issue. And what I've tried to do in the book is make it simple so that people understand a sick fat cell. It's not normal. It's not communicating. It's not serving its function. That's one point against you. That's a negative. There's nothing good about a fat cell that's too big and that's toxic. But there are other factors too, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. And I think that was what was kind of the shocking thing is we're going to go through the process that you have here to solve this problem. Obviously, that's the promise of the book. But I want to talk about the two core things that are kind of behind why we are where we are and why what you're going to tell us to do is going to work. But it was the toxic exposures. And, I think we know some of them. You talked about chemicals, and some of it might be viral and some of it's the artificial light. So there's a lot of different things that are going on that are disrupting our system, the way everything else works. And then you start talking about, again, you got deeper into obesogens, which again are the kind of the things that are making us get fat. I was really surprised, as I went through. Well, I guess I wasn't surprised because I'm a eat real food kind of guy. I talk about that all the time. And people will say, well, okay, I'm going to cut my calories. I'm going to drink Diet Coke and I'm going to eat the low fat yogurt. We talk about, just even eating meat, buying it in a grocery store. Some of these things, and then personal care products, household products, all this. So all this stuff it's not like this occasionally, or we're just accidentally finding it here and there. It's like everywhere.
Everywhere. Read a label. My wife is my number one proponent of everything. If there's a chemical name on it, she hardly ever buys it. Even for my dog, which is another thing I talk about in the book. I talk about the fact that something's going on here besides calories in and calories out. It can't be that. It's got to be, as you were just mentioning, these chemical obesogens and how they affect how a gene expresses itself. And that's the key. The key message of this book is our genetics are our genetics. They haven't changed. It's not that there's a fat gene. There are probably 200 genes that are involved in obesity, maybe more. It is whether the gene is being expressed or not, and whether it's a favorable gene. For example, the developing fetus has what we call a pluripotential cell. Pluri meaning that cell can become a fat cell or a muscle cell. Well, there's a gene that directs it to become a muscle cell. But if it's turned off, it's going to make a fat cell. And these obesogens create changes on the surface of that gene that are unfavorable. And so we have statistics, which I quote in the book. John Kennedy, when he was inaugurated, we had a 11 to 14% obesity rate. That was it. And he was aghast. It's now 47%. 47% of our population is clinically obese. 70% is overweight or obese. That's frightening. Talk about a pandemic, and it's not just here. It's everywhere. And the thing that stimulated me years ago was looking at the obesity epidemic and saying, what is it? Why are we getting fat? Guess what? It's not just us. It's our pets. It's marmosets. It's wild mice. It's monkeys. Everything that you can think of. Newborns are getting fatter. Children are obese. That number is frightening. It's over 20% of children are now obese. And people wonder why this is happening. And it's happening because of these quote unquote obesogens in our environment. You see, if you go back to John F. Kennedy's days, we didn't have Teflon. We didn't have nonstick cookware. Was just beginning. When I was a kid, you stained the couch, it was stained forever. Now we have stain repellents and everything else, and all of these. We didn't use hormones to this extent that we use them to feed chickens, cattle, and so on and so forth. And so all of these chemicals get into our body. They create these epigenetic, that's what it's called, epigenetic, surface of the gene, changes that unfortunately are transgenerational, which means they're inheritable. That's how that happens. This is why it's an inexorable climb into, I think, medical bankruptcy treating complications of obesity. But there was just an article in Lancet, I read it yesterday, about the increase in cancers now in young people. That was just in Lancet, just came out yesterday. There's a tripling of the rate since the 1980s. Tripling. That's pretty scary. So young people are getting cancers earlier, obviously, at a rate that is much higher, including pancreatic, testicular, colon, and it's linked to obesity. And that's what the conclusion of the Lancet article was. And if you look at the complications of obesity, they are diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. So it's a long-winded statement to say how these obesogens, they're everywhere. They're in all of us. And we have to come to grips with that. And that's part of what I realized as I was saying, well, how do you solve this? How do you begin to solve it? And that was the question that I asked myself. And a couple of my advisors that were working with me on the book said, you better have an answer, otherwise you don't really have a book. Hey, you better be able to say something here. And so it took a while to take a look and see what are the steps that people would have to take. But we're maybe getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we'll definitely get there, because I think that is, you can do a study and not give them an answer, but you can't write a book and not not tell us something. And yeah, you can't be on this podcast and not tell us something too. So we'll get there. We'll definitely get there. Okay. The other side of this was our behavior. But the nature of our behavior is not one of, as we mentioned earlier, individual agency, where we're saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do and this is why I'm going to do it. It's much more complex than that. Can you talk about toxic behaviors and how that's a part of this problem?
Yes. And it took me a while to get there. I got a lot of prodding from my advisors to look at the behavioral literature. It was interesting, but what really pushed me into it was how can we change and reverse these epigenetic changes? Are they reversible? Because although what I'd like to do is prevent obesity from happening in the next generation and the generation after that, in other words, reverse the trend, I realize people also who are struggling with weight want to find out what I can do to at least stabilize, lose and stabilize, lose and stabilize. And I realized that behavior must play a role. And the thing that stimulated me is very interesting. I just talked about epigenetic changes that are unfavorable. And I looked at some data on, this may seem a little off balance with the question, but people who undergo gastric bypass surgery reverse their epigenetic changes. And I said, wow, you mean a surgeon's knife and doing a gastrojejunostomy, which is what it is, reverses epigenetics? That's strange. And then I said, well, what else does it? And looking at the animal studies first, it seems that consistent behavior, changing toxic behaviors. Let me mention some toxic behaviors. Eating when you're not hungry. Your fat sends out a signal. There's a normal signal that goes out to tell you you're hungry. Now, that doesn't mean that if somebody puts a plate of pasta in front of you and you're a pasta fanatic, you're not hungry, but you're going to taste it. Tasting it is one thing. Eating the whole plate is another thing. Ben, as I say in the book, we are good finishers. We are really good finishers.
Yeah, starving kids in India.
Yeah, right. Our mothers told us that, right? But the fact is, those kinds of eating when you're not hungry, eating really late at night, eating the wrong types of foods on a regular basis. And there is where we come into not only densely processed foods, but those that have 37 different ingredients, plus the chocolate, which is what you thought it was, right?
Yeah.
But, it's got a stabilizer, it's got a this. Those toxic behaviors, using skincare products in excess that are not really, should I say, for your internal environment, they're not safe. They have things like parabens, which are known obesogens. And, we want to decrease the amount of sunscreen that we use that has parabens. And There are places you can look and you can find, and I list some of them in the book as references to go to buy those products that work just as well. And those kind of toxic behaviors are what we need to attack. The problem with most people, Alan, is that they try to attack them all at once.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. And I tell my patients that the first thing I want you to do is make a list of those behaviors that you think are really bad. Bring them back. Let's look at them. Okay? And we'll go over that. Then I want you to tackle one at a time. I want you to master one at a time. I want you to find a substitute or reverse that behavior. But here's the key. You have to be consistent. So what do I mean by that? Studies show that occasional exercise over a 1 or 2 year period of time doesn't really have an effect on your weight loss program. But consistent exercise actually changes epigenetics. That could be you set up, your body is now going to be messaged that you do your cardio workouts at the gym or at home on an elliptical trainer 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, in the mornings. Your body actually recognizes that. And that consistency, for reasons that you and I will never understand, probably, at least not during our lifetimes, that changes your epigenetics favorably. So consistent behavior. Part of that is not getting depressed, staying positive. You're going to have a bad day. You're going to eat some dessert. You're going to have something that's, 4 French fries, whatever, a whole bag of French fries. You're going to do it. What happens to dieters is they get depressed. What do? They eat more. And that because the fat, the salt tastes good, the sugar stimulates parts of the brain that says you're okay. And so people start to feel better. So behavior modification becomes a critical point to anyone who's going to do weight loss. And that's one of the things that became extraordinarily important. And I dedicated a whole chapter in the book to this whole behavioral thing, this whole behavioral aspect of weight gain and weight loss, and how, in that case, the only agency that's important, that is taking personal responsibility, is not beating yourself up. It's really important that you stay positive. And, think of Tony Robbins in a sense. I mean, just stay positive. Picture that picture. I mean, he wasn't wrong. He's not wrong. If you can do that, it turns out you favorably affect your own epigenetics.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One of the things you got into in the toxic behaviors that I think is really, really important, I want to highlight this, is I think a lot of times we want to do something. Okay, so I want to lose weight, and we go into this thing, and we're like, okay, I think the patient you had, it was ice cream, but I see this sometimes with clients with alcohol. I want to quit, but I don't want to quit, and I want to figure out what my moderation, my line is. But sometimes we're not the kind of person who's going to play by the rules all the time, even when we made the rules. And so you called it negotiating with food.
Right.
We try to set a rule for ourselves. Say, okay, well, I can have a couple drinks on a weekend, or I can have ice cream on these days,
right.
For these reasons.
It's like the everything in moderation. You've heard that term, right?
Yeah.
What's moderation for you is not moderation for me. And that's the problem. So it's important to realize going in that you can't negotiate with the donut. You're not going to you're going to lose. It's like, I think I said a cookie. You can't negotiate with a cookie.
Yeah.
I'll just have the top half of this Oreo. No, you won't. You'll come back and get the bottom half later. Don't kill yourself over it. Okay? Recognize that everything in moderation doesn't work. It's not a workable solution in reality. And studies have shown that over and over and over again. The interesting study sometimes in young kids, in kids, really youngsters, kindergartners, first graders, they will choose healthy foods a lot of the time before they're inundated with TV and all the ads for all the Cocoa Puffs and whatever it is that's out there. Remember, and I talk about this in the book, the food companies are not your friend. Okay, they're in alliance with the diet companies. So together they make a cabal, if you will, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you can throw in the pharmaceuticals and much of the medical establishment as well. So they're all making money off the same thing.
I think that my colleagues are really not as well informed about obesity as they should be and as they want to be. I believe that there are a number of physicians who are perplexed and tear their hair out over the fact that no matter how much they admonish their patients continue to fail. And we talk about that in the book a little bit, but I wrote this book, Outsmarting Obesity, because I really thought that it would appeal not only to the public, and I wrote it at a level that, not to demean you, but you picked it up and read it.
I read it.
And that's great. And probably enjoyed it and chuckled a little bit at it because I tried to add some humor. But yeah. I did also write it for the medical profession to at least pick it up, read a chapter or two, and think about the fact that they're battling, maybe they're fighting the wrong battle with patients. I get the question all the time, Dr. Lonky, what do you think about GLP-1s? What do you think about, Ozempic and Wegovy and all of this? It's like a diet. It's going to work as long as you take it. I think if you're not a diabetic and you're taking it, you're playing with fire. If you don't need it, why would you take a chemical? Some of the people taking it with the people that say, "Whoa, I don't want to take this COVID vaccine. I don't know what that is. They're injecting it into my body. Maybe it's and here they are injecting Wegovy to lose 5 pounds to fit into that dress for the Oscars or whatever it is." And the fact that Chris Talley, who worked on this book with me, and he's a sports nutritionist and a Hollywood nutritionist, so he really is dealing with all the professional sports teams. He's the guy. And these are problems that, for example, athletes have when they stop playing. I mean, here, talk about regular exercise. All right. I have a grandson who plays hockey. He's now 16. He's playing travel hockey. He's looking to college and wants to play college hockey. There isn't a moment in his life that he isn't active. But, you get to be 40 and 45 and you're not out on the ice and playing hockey every day. You can't eat the same way. He could eat 3 people's meals for lunch and then dinner. And he's too thin. His coaches want him to put weight on. He's got to eat protein, protein, protein. So our behaviors have to adjust to where we are in life. And that's the important message of the book, having Chris involved, putting vignettes in every chapter.
Yeah, I think that was fascinating to have him involved because you don't really, yes, I know Hollywood actresses and actors, they need to look a certain way for a part, they need to do certain things, and some of it's okay, but some of it is just, you shouldn't lose that much weight that fast. You shouldn't put on that much weight that fast. But you want to give me $10 million? Okay, I'll put on 40 pounds.
But I think the point I'm trying to make is that whatever plan you come up with has to be well thought out. It has to be smart. Okay, I'm morbidly obese. I need to do something. I'll start with Wegovy for 3 months. That will be the kickstart I need to lose 11, 12, 13 pounds and know that I can do it. And now that I've read this book, I know step 2 is my behavior is going to change and my relationship with food is going to change. Now, people say when they're on the GLP inhibitors and so on and so forth, they change their relationship with food. But basically, it makes you nauseated. That's what it does. It fills your stomach, and it makes you feel full. And it does a lot of other not so good things. And I see a lot of side effects now with this. But any plan that you have to restrict your calories for a 3-month or 6-month period, I wouldn't go longer than that, because you're going to be disappointed. You're going to lose 25 pounds and stop, and you're going to gain 30. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think most of us have actually that wanted to lose weight, started losing weight, experienced that very thing. We lost the weight, we gained back more. And you even explained in the book that yo-yo dieting, yo-yo weight loss is probably the worst thing we could do for ourselves from a health perspective, But I want to dive into the process that you've put forward as the solution of what we can do to outsmart obesity. And the acronym is AIPE. And I look at that and my head wants to say ape.
Well, that's what I say. So but you're okay. It's ape.
It's okay, but we cannot ignore the I because.
Right. So okay. AIPE is accept, identify, prevent, and eliminate. And think of it in terms of toxic exposures, first of all. First of all, you've got to come to the acceptance that you're carrying a toxic burden. If you don't accept that, none of this means anything to you. Every one of us is carrying a burden of toxins, probably in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 different toxins if you did the entire blood panel, which would cost a fortune because we only do it for research purposes. But when they have done it, for example, newborns have over 200 toxins in their blood. A newborn baby is born with over 200 toxic chemicals in their blood. Well, they got them from mom, okay? So they crossed the placenta. The rest of us are just accumulating toxins. So accept the fact that you are carrying a toxic load. And on the behavioral side, accept the fact that you have toxic behaviors with food. You have a toxic relationship with food. The second is identify. And I gave you a little insight to that with the behaviors. Make a list. Where are you getting exposed that you can do something about? You want to change your cookware? That would be good. If you're using nonstick cookware that's chemically coated, they're perfluorochemicals. And, those are chemicals that are obesogens. You cook an egg on it, and it's going to get into your food. So identify, are you storing your cleaning goods in the kitchen? Don't do that. Simple things like coming home from the dry cleaners, people that use a dry cleaner, if it's not a new wave green dry cleaner, and it's the old, perchloric, perc cleaners using chemicals, that plastic covering on it, before you hang it in your closet, take the plastic covering, outside. Let it air out. Don't put it in your closet because those are chemicals that are getting on your other clothing. Try and avoid, as many of these pitfalls as you can. Some you can't escape. And I tell people, we eliminated all of our nonstick cookware. I mean, they make good cookware that doesn't get screwed up and works without chemical coating. But if I go to a restaurant, do I know what they used? I have no idea what they used. Go to Starbucks. Did they use a nonstick pan to make those muffins? Probably. So you're never going to be free of these chemicals, but you're going to decrease your burden. So identify where things are going wrong. And I give lists of things in the book to identify, and identify the behaviors as well. Now, the next becomes interesting because they're different. For chemical exposures, you want to prevent the absorption of these things that you can't get out of your life into your bloodstream. We should say, for most of us, 80% of the chemicals get into our body because we put them in our mouth, we eat them or drink them. Those that use skincare, maybe it's 70%, and more comes from the skin. We absorb them. The rest we inhale. But the inhalation part is not that important as it is eating. And so I tell people, if you want to prevent the absorption, then the regular use of adsorbents for the gut, in other words, to take along with your food, so that these chemicals are bound in your gut and they go out the back end, so to speak. And they never become absorbed. They don't get into your bloodstream in the first place. Those are good products to be on your shelf for all of us because we are exposed no matter what happens. So this is the prevent absorption. That's what the prevention was all about. The prevention for behavior is, once you have that list, tackling it one step at a time in a logical sequence. And we go through some examples in the book of how that could work. And the last is eliminate. There is the rub. So you have chemicals in your body. How am I going to get them out? Well, it turns out there are a couple of ways. We talked about, obviously, sweat and using infrared sauna because you can stay in the sauna longer. That's the only reason infrared works. In any sauna, anything that makes you sweat a lot will obviously take it out of the fat because that's where that sweat is coming from. It's coming from fat cells, much of it. And so you can sweat out some of these toxins. Otherwise, we have to look at certain molecules. There are some unique molecules that you can take by mouth. You know, you can obviously have them infused intravenously, but they have a lot of different complications. But taking them by mouth, they absorb into the bloodstream, and they will help solubilize these insoluble chemicals. Certainly, those that are heavy metals will go out immediately. And I did a study in coal miners that looked like, these guys had lead levels and mercury levels and cadmium. And we gave them this one concoction, and it just, it poured out in their urine. And their levels came down and down and down because it's a chelator. It chelates the metals and doesn't chelate the ones you need, which is cool because you don't want to do that with calcium because you need that. You don't want to do that with magnesium. You kind of need that.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it with potassium or sodium. Those are big molecules. They don't fit in there. But the smaller ones like mercury and cadmium and the bad stuff, lead, they're smaller molecules. They fit right into the matrix and they're eliminated quickly. But because these chemicals, this compound has a net charge on it, it also attracts a lot of these organic molecules to stick, and they get eliminated too. Is this the only thing out there right now? It would appear that there are a few other things, and this is a zeolite. It's called clinoptilolite, and I mentioned it. There are some that are absorbed into your body and others that are not. And there's really, really good ones and really, really bad ones, so on and so forth. But even the bad zeolites, if you take them by mouth, they will at least bind these toxins in your gut. So eliminating these toxins, it doesn't happen overnight, can make your fat, and it draws it out of the fat, which is cool. And that's really nice. So really, basically what you're doing is looking at a system where, okay, I'm going to detoxify myself. It's not a weekend detox, weekend at Bernie's, whatever it is. It's not that. It's continual. And you use it. There are people that are putting it in drinks. There are people that are talking about putting it in hair care products because it can be absorbed. It would be a tremendous advantage for people to have their hands on this. From a behavioral standpoint, obviously preventing and eliminating kind of go close together. You're preventing the behavior, you kind of, once you've eliminated it, it's really great. It's a great feeling. I'm one of the people that the ice cream thing. I can't say no to ice cream. I don't know why. So I don't keep any in the house. That was my solution. There's none in the house.
Yeah.
That was my solution. It may not be your solution, but I can't negotiate with a pint of ice cream. I'm sorry. I lose that negotiation. Well, it was in Italy, and every time they had dessert, everybody had gelato. I didn't have any. Do you want to know something? I don't crave it anymore. It's a funny thing. I used to, but now I don't. For my wife, it's that toffee. Oh my God. If it's toffee in the house, she'll eat the whole can. So we don't allow it in the house. That was her solution too. But everybody, the AIPE approach is not an overnight lose a lot of weight. It is, AIPE means I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to consistently exercise. My behavior modification is going to be such that I'm going to set up a schedule and I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to eliminate some of these toxic behaviors that I have, and I'm going to go on a calorie restricted diet for 90 days. You can buy a plan, you can do whatever it is. And once you've done the plan and you've lost your 7, 10, 12 pounds, now you're going to put in place APE. You're going to say, okay, I know now that I don't want to gain the weight. My goal right now isn't more weight loss. It is to prevent the weight gain. And I have to be smart about it because I understand that my genes are telling my body to do something, and I need to try and reverse that as much as I can. And that combination of limiting the calories in and understanding why you're obese in the first place and why you're going to gain it back if you don't do something, modifying your behavior, eliminating these toxins from your body, doing all of this stuff, that is a prevention of the regaining of the weight. That was what the plan was all about.
I really, really wish that our government would be a big part of the solution for eliminate on this, but I'm not going to hold my breath. So this is something that we need to do. One of the core things I did want to say is like, okay, because we're storing these things in our fat, when we're losing the fat, our basically load that's live at this given point in time in our body is there. It's coming out. So having a good process through this whole thing and, preventing more from coming in, eliminating it as it's being released. I think that's really a great way to go through this. But again, it's acceptance and it's identification. So it is APE, but don't forget any one of these because all four of them are really, really important to get to this solution.
Well, I'm glad you went through that. I think it's important for the listener to understand that forearmed is forewarned. That's the way I look at it. If you understand what's going on with your body, you're not going to be so afraid of the fact that okay, I went on a diet, I lost 20 pounds, I gained 1 or 2 back. You're not going to exercise the rest of the way. You're going to have a better strategy than that. And that's what, I wrote the book partly because I wanted to really help with people who struggle with this. So many of my patients just struggle with it. And it is a source of tremendous anxiety and it promotes abnormal behavior, not to mention, obviously, all the diseases that go along with it. And I want to mention something quickly because I know we're running out of time, but I would like to mention the fact that when you hear these people talk about healthy at any size, there is no such thing. You can be physically fit at any size. There's a big difference between physical fitness and health. All of the data point to the fact that obesity leads to a shortened life, And obesity leads to illness. And days lost from work, days lost from your life, not to mention diabetic limb loss and so on and so forth. It is not, there is no such thing as healthy at any size. Physically fit at any size? Yes. Some of these people are fairly stable. That is, they haven't yet gotten diabetes, but they will. They will. And if you take a look at these large populations of people who feel that they're healthy at any size and they do all this, if they're obese, study after study, whether it's in the US, Great Britain, China, all these studies show they have a shortened life expectancy, they have a higher cardiovascular risk profile, and the cancer profile is at least twice what it is for non-obese individuals.
So, Dr. Lonky, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
From my point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm asking you.
First of all, accept yourself. I think that's the most important thing. If people who don't accept, so okay, I'm overweight. I'm personally overweight. I'm not obese, but I'm overweight. I would love to get rid of more pounds. Am I going to go on a diet? No, I'm going to continue to use the strategies that I mentioned. So be happy with yourself. Number 2, diminish the number of chemical products that you consume. And I mean, read labels, not the calories. Look at the ingredients. All those chemicals. If you can't, sodium chloride is okay. That's salt. It could be too much salt, but that's the number. The number 2 thing is read labels and understand that these are chemicals that really don't do anything great for you. And number 3, I think that eating fresh food from, to achieve wellness and having a plan, an exercise plan, that goes together for me. And that's how you achieve that happiness and wellness.
Thank you. Dr. Lonky, if someone wanted to learn more about you and your book, Outsmarting Obesity, where would you like for me to send them?
Obviously, it's available on Amazon now for pre-order. It will be out on the 10th of September in bookstores. They can go to my website, drlonky.com. That's probably the best place to go. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Facebook as Dr. Lonky. I'm all on LinkedIn, which is more professional, but still fairly active. But I would ask them to go to the website first, and that'll link you to all the other places, and you can order the book there.
Excellent. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/659, and I'll be sure to have the links there. Dr. Lonky, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Alan, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome back, Rachel.
Hey, Alan, that was an amazing interview. I mean, there's just so many big things that we could talk about. I can't even imagine reading his book. I'm sure it was incredible to get through. But my goodness, I mean, so much has changed. The obesity rates going up. We know more about fat as a working for you or against you. I mean, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, this is the book where I learned that there's 1 billion obese people on the planet, which I just thought was, when it first hit me, I'm like, well, that's insane. And then I think, well, the United States has probably 20% of them, which is true. And it's not just an adult thing anymore.
No,
it's kids.
Younger and younger. Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is a problem. And, a lot of people will just say, well, it's just calories. And it's, if you just do the things, and they don't recognize that there are all of these other aspects to why we're carrying this extra fat that have absolutely nothing to do with what we're eating or when we're eating or how much we're eating. Some people are just going to have this propensity to store more fat because of the other things that are going on that they haven't addressed yet. But the core thing I wanted to get into with you, so we were talking offline a minute ago, is that I think a lot of people look at fat and say, oh, fat bad.
Right. Yeah.
Insulin bad. And it's not that simple. Fat is an organ. It has specific purposes in our body. And so we need some fat. We need a healthy amount of fat. So we can't go at it that. And then, for a while they still is. Okay. There are two basic types of fat. There's brown fat and there's white fat. And so we know, like, babies are born with more of the brown fat, and that helps them stay warm, and it helps do some other things for them. As we get older, we end up with more white fat. And so that's the fat and the visceral fat. So, they've labeled fat to try to lead us down a line of saying this is the good fat and that's the bad fat. But that's the point being, though, is I think people just say fat is bad.
Bad is bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a little bit more complex than that.
It is. Oh, it is. And we were talking about the chemicals all around us. It's not simply what you eat or how much you exercise. We're exposed to all these different chemicals in our environment that, it's that could play a role as to how healthy we are overall, or how much fat that we manage on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it's concerning sometimes how many chemicals we are exposed to on a daily basis and what role it can play.
Yeah. I mean, it's something as simple as buying a new couch. And the chemicals that they use to make it flame retardant are off-gassing in your house or apartment. Those could potentially be chemicals that will cause your body to want to store more fat. And one of the things that happens in the body is that the liver, which is primarily responsible for dealing with these chemicals that we're intaking, it's a pretty smart organ. And so it can do its job, but when it's overwhelmed, it has a bypass, and the bypass is to store the stuff in fat. And so for it to do its job, you may need to store more fat to store more chemicals, because the liver's overwhelmed. And so it's just this balance of saying, okay, yes, nutrition is important for weight loss. We know movement is important to aid in weight loss. We know sleep is important to aid in weight loss. And we know stress management is important for managing weight loss. And now there's a whole nother list of things that are also important and need to be looked at, is what chemicals are you and hormones and things you're exposed to. What's in your household cleaners? What's in your personal care products? I mean, you might love that face cream, but what's in it that could be a problem for you? And then that's when you kick in his APE acronym. So you accept that face cream is bad for you. Okay, you might love the way it looks, it makes your face look and your skin feel, but if it's causing you to put on body fat, then you have to come to terms with that, accept it, identify that that's what it is, stop using it. Find a face cream that doesn't have that ingredient in it, and maybe it won't work as well.
Think about all the things you're exposed to on a daily basis. I mean, from your toothpaste in the morning, soaps, your shampoos, the makeups, of course. If you're cleaning the counter with whatever product you're cleaning the counter with. If you happen to have a nickel allergy, you probably shouldn't be drinking out of those really expensive insulated metal cups, because then could be exposing not just your lips and your mouth, your palate, but also your exposing your insides to the nickel and those metals. Plasticware. I drink out a lot of plastic bottles when I'm on a run. I mean, just all day long, there's just all these things that you may not consider as having an exposure to a chemical, but they're there. Yeah.
And so one of the big takeaways from the book, and because again, he's a scientist, he's looking at this from a very specific point of view. And he's recognizing that this isn't, it isn't just an individual problem. There's going to have to be global solutions to some of these problems, like plastics and personal care products. And you see some of it, the European Union and Canada are a lot more stringent on what it allows to exist for their people. The United States is a little bit more lax in what's out there. So we're exposed probably to a lot more.
Yeah.
And so it's just recognizing that this is out there. You can't totally eliminate all of it, which is any individual be impossible. But the more of those things that you're able to knock down, and of course, do the core four first: your nutrition, your movement, your sleep,
Sure.
and your stress. And then if that's not moving the needle enough for you, then you want to start looking at other things that might be going on, like chemical exposures, hormone exposures,
Yeah,
and the quality of, and the quality of a lot of the foods and things that you're doing. So,
for sure.
if you live in a city and, there's lots of cars and you're running around, there's a lot of, chemicals that are in the air that you're just running through.
Oh, for sure.
I used to hate running in the city. I much prefer to run in the country. It's nicer.
It is.
But, you are where you are. And so
Right.
there are things that are going to be outside your control, but then
True.
a lot of this is. And so this book's an opportunity for you to kind of go through and start doing that research that you can know, okay, this is in this thing and I should not be eating this. This is in this thing.
Yeah.
I should not be putting this on my skin.
Sure.
And then you can begin to eliminate some of those things or get filters to address some of those things so that it's not such a huge problem for you. And you're going to be better off for it.
That sounds really great. His book is aptly titled Outsmarting Obesity because it is not just the easy things. It's not just anything. It is definitely a little complicated at times.
It can be, but start with the big four. And then when you're getting into this, and then you want to take it to the next level, this is a good book to get you primed on how to start that investigation.
That sounds great. Amazing.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you next week.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Barbara and Michael Grossman and discuss their book, Ageless Love, The Sexy Science of Falling in Love Forever. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.